What up, YouTube? Welcome back to Savage Reactions, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. This time we finna get into some gaming reactions, some bosses. There's some bosses. Well, there's some games on here that I haven't even played yet. Like Sekiro. Like I was trying to get into Sekiro and Neo. Really, I got Neo too. I mean, I haven't really went all the way deep in it. You know what I'm saying? Now, Elden Ring, yeah. Dark Souls, yeah. I'm still new to the SoulsBourne franchise and things. Still new to that, but I have played Dark Souls, the first one. I played the third one. I skipped the second one for some reason, but I played the third one. And oh my god, the third one is what got me hooked. And then Elden Ring came. And of course, that was like the cherry on top. But in this video here, I'm finna see what other big bosses there were in the other Soulsborne games. So let's get to the video, yo. I'm kind of anxious to see.
What's up, everyone? Soldier First Class here. In today's mission, to celebrate the arrival of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC for Elden Ring, we're going to list the top 10 hardest Soulsborne bosses. The Soulsborne series is famous for its brutal challenge and incredible boss designs, and for redefining what challenges and accomplishments mean inside of an interactive media. From its first entry, Demon Souls, to its most recent entry in Elden Ring, From Software has not only created an entire genre of video games, it's influenced the video game industry in ways that few companies ever have. For this list, we'll be discussing only the toughest, most brutal challenges that the Soulsborne series has to offer. We also won't disqualify bosses for any cheese methods or boundary-breaking glitches that the average player wouldn't experience. This keeps all bosses on an even playing field, since even some of the hardest bosses in the entire series have some of the finest cheese known to man that can trivialize them under the right conditions. But before we get started, if you enjoy this list, be sure to light the bonfire on that like button.
Oh yeah, and I have played Bloodborne. I still ain't finished playing Bloodborne.
Out of the way, let's get right into the list. Number 10, Alfather, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. I first played Sekiro when the game first launched, and after getting past the Chained Ogre, I deleted the game and decided it wasn't for me. I then messaged Sony for my money back, at which point they told me to, and I quote, "Eat our asses, get good, LOL." Which I thought was kind of unprofessional, but whatever. Fast forward to 2022, and I was riding high on having beaten Millennia in Elden Ring, and decided to give Sekiro another shot. I got good, completed the game, and even sacrificed my soul to get the platinum.
Nice.
But one of the largest roadblocks on that journey was Alfather. Having defeated the older version of Al atop Ashina Castle, I assumed this fight wouldn't be that bad, but per usual, I was wrong. Between an all-new arsenal of attacks and extremely aggressive AI, this younger version known as Alfather was absolutely brutal, and I couldn't begin to even tell you how many attempts this took for me. Even after I did win, I felt like a part of me was left in that boss arena. For leaving to go get milk and not coming back, Alfather settles in at number 10 on this list, and number 1 as the worst father in all of Soulsborne. Number 9, Black Dragon Calamite.
I've played Dark Souls, and I know this dragon.
This boss fight beat my ass several times, too well. Maybe even more times than I care to admit.
And when this giant Calamite off the air, and he was blind when he did it, that was cold. That was cold.
And of the Artorias of the Abyss DLC. And this is a DLC that includes both Artorias and Manus as boss fights. To even safely fight Calamite, you'll need to complete the questline that gets a blind giant named Hawkeye Goff to fire a massive arrow to knock it down a peg. Which, by the way, Goff might have the biggest flex voice line in the entire game. This dude is blind as fuck and states, "Of little help to thee, I'm afraid," and then proceeds to shoot the hardest boss in the game out of the air like a trick shot he saw on Dude Perfect. It's not impossible to defeat Calamite without Goff's assistance, but you'd have to be one sick, self-loathing bastard to pull this off. The problem with Calamite is that he has a counter for just about any strategy. Stay at a distance, he'll breathe magic-infused fire at you. Stay in close, and he can stomp, claw, grab, and breathe fire directly underneath him. He also has a devastating move that, if afflicted, the player suffers from a temporary debuff that doubles the damage the player takes from Calamite's attacks. While better strategies have come out over the years since the DLC released, that doesn't change the fact that Calamite is downright brutal and well deserving of the number 9 spot on this list. Number 8, Malekith, the Black Blade. Elden
Hold
Ring.
on.
Elden Ring was
I wonder. Okay, so for me in the Soulsborne series, out of playing Dark Souls one, I play a little bit of Bloodborne. Out of Dark Souls one, Dark S- uh, Dark Souls three, Elden Ring, plus all the DLCs. There's still one boss to me. See, even though I haven't even played Sekiro, there's still one boss that gave me the hardest time, the hardest time. And I wonder if that boss is on this list. Let's see.
wasn't the first game in the series that I played, but it definitely was the first one that I finished. And one major obstacle in my way that even with summons I had a major struggle with was Malekith, the Black Blade. This Keeper of Destined Death also happens to be my second favorite
It's
fight
not
in the entire
Malekith.
game, and if it doesn't become painfully obvious by the end of this video, the harder the boss
Malekith
fight,
was a bitch
typically the
too,
more
though.
I enjoy it. While
He
that's
was a
definitely not
bitch
always
too.
the case,
For real,
thankfully
for real.
Malekith fills the difficulty wish and then
That
some. The
black
start of the
that
fight is fairly simple,
that
and you may recognize the
that
beast
black flame
clergyman from the
sword.
Caelid Bestial Sanctum
That
if you did the
that,
Deathridge
that shit
side
is like
quest,
instant
but it's
death.
when his second form arrives that the real fun begins. Not only does
Yeah,
he become Yoda from Revenge of the Sith, his attacks also add a burn effect. While this is active, a portion of your health bar is rendered useless, and you also lose health at a steady pace. While his
exactly.
moves are entirely dodgeable, it's the speed at which they come at you that makes this fight so difficult. It's also the fact that Malekith jumps around the arena like a rat on crack,
He
using the environment
does.
to his
Fuck, he
advantage, which is
does.
also another thing I really love. You can obtain the Blasphemous Claw as a way to counter a few of his attacks, but he's still just as brutal of a challenge regardless, and earns his number 9 spot and the number 2 best boy spot after Sif. Number 7, Sister Freed, Dark Souls
That's
3.
my
Sister
sister
Freed,
Freed. Even
Sister
though I did
Freed was
fight her.
introduced in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC for Dark Souls 3, and as is tradition, checks all the boxes for Soulsborne DLC, providing the toughest challenges the games have to offer. While Dark Souls 3 gave us bosses whose delayed attacks are
Oh,
extremely
there's
deadly,
the
it's her
nameless
speed that
king.
gives even Dark Souls veterans
It's not
nowhere to
him.
breathe. Sister Freed is the first 3-phase boss fight on this list, and if it weren't for how vulnerable she can be to backstabs, she'd probably be higher on this list. But that doesn't make her any less challenging, as you have to actually
Doesn't
be
she
skilled
has
enough
like
and know her
doesn't she have
moveset
like
kit well enough to make use of this
three
strategy.
stages?
Her first phase is difficult, the second phase with Father Ariandel is much easier, and
She
she'll be more
does.
defensive unless you get too close to her, and then her third phase is when the real Dark Souls 3 begins. Her third phase is absolutely brutal, and due to Dark Souls 3's combat engine, rivals Malekith in speed and aggression. She also makes use of
Yes.
invisible teleportation, frostbite, and black flame, so for those familiar with Priscilla from Dark Souls, you'll recognize her signature weapon and attacks. Sister
Um,
Freed is one of those bosses that even after learning her moveset, I still often struggle with, leaving her at number 7 on the list. Number 6, Dark Eater
there it
Midir,
is.
Dark Souls 3. The second Dark Souls 3
This motherfucking boss right here, bruh. Oh my god. Dark Eater Madeir. This fucking boss right here. Oh my god. Gave me the hardest time in gaming history for me. It took me almost like 3 months to beat Dark Eater Madeir. Like seriously. I can't stand this boss. And there was another boss that was almost there. There was another boss that's almost there.
boss
But
on this
but
list,
this
Dark
boss
Eater
right
Madeir
here,
on any
oh my
given day could
god.
be ranked even higher. Between magic fire breathing, his massive HP pool, and the only weakness being his head, this 2-phase boss fight is a war of attrition between this
I'm
legendary
saying,
dragon and the
Jesus.
player. I honestly lost track of how many times it took me to defeat Madeir, because this dragon destroyed me so many times, I thought he was going to brand his name into my ass to prove ownership. The first half of this fight is entirely manageable, but
This
it's when
boss
he
right
starts
here
throwing
is fucking
heavy-hitting magic at
crazy,
you that it
bruh.
becomes a death march.
This
The
is the
other
hardest
problem is that
boss I
the
ever
same run
fought
underneath the
against.
large enemies and chip away at them strategy doesn't work here. Its legs and arms don't take near the damage that the head does, and there are only a few opportunities after certain moves to be able to damage its head. You can technically win without hitting its head, but you're in for one of the longest boss fights ever if you do,
I'm
because you
saying,
hardly do any damage and his
this
health pool
move
is
right here
massive. He
one-shotted
also
me
likes to breathe
every
fire
time.
at you, even if you're in close quarters, and his magic attacks later in the fight are absolutely devastating. Bring in your lightning imbued weapon, attack the head, and grind out one of the hardest earned boss encounters in Dark Souls 3. Number 5, Orphan of Kos, Bloodborne. You knew it.
So I haven't
I
gotten
knew
this
it.
far.
We all knew Orphan of Kos
I
was
haven't
going to be
gotten
on
this
this
far. I haven't
list.
gotten
I just
close to
didn't know
being this
where,
close
and top 5 is
or this
definitely where it
far to
belongs, but I
Bloodborne.
just didn't know which part of the top
I
5.
think the
My
last
history with
boss
Orphan of
in
Kos is complicated because
Bloodborne, hold on, in Bloodborne, the last boss I think I remember fighting was like it looked like a little. It was like a summoning type thing, like an old ass lady, but it was like this infected skin looking motherfucker. But it was like in a little dark room, but it had like summons and shit. And it hit one. It's on one end of the corner. Then you kill it, and then the spawns on the other end. I can't remember what it's called, but I think that's the last boss fight I had in Bloodborne that I can remember.
I was a little over leveled in preparation, and while I barely made it out of this fight by the skin of my teeth, I did defeat this boss in one attempt. In fact, Lady Maria took me more attempts than Orphan did, but just because I only took one attempt doesn't mean I don't see the punishing difficulty of this fight, because trust me, I found out real quick. While the first phase is entirely manageable on its own, it's when he sprouts wings and becomes rabidly aggressive that the real fight begins. Throwing every possible move the Orphan has at its arsenal, including its shrimp placenta, Orphan is an absolute nightmare befitting its classification as a great one. The thing I love about Orphan, and something you'll see throughout this list, is that I love when bosses make you do
This
the
boss do
opposite of
look
what you've been conditioned to
freaky.
do for
What the
most
fuck
of
is that? Is
or
it
the
holding?
entirety of the game. Orphan is unique in that some of his attacks are set up that the game wants you to dodge toward him instead of away from him. This was really hard to break for me, as Bloodborne was the final game in the series that I completed, and the entire time I'd been conditioned to dodge away from or left or right of every boss's movesets. But Orphan said, "Nah man, fuck that, you're gonna come to me, you little bitch," and then proceeds to punish you for your transgressions. So grab your best hunter's tools, maybe think about leveling up a little bit, and then pray to the great ones that you can take out the Orphan and one of the hardest bosses in all of SoulSourne.
It's one of the hardest
Number
bosses.
4, the Nameless King,
The
Dark Souls
Nameless
3.
King. This is my
The
guy right
Nameless
here.
King. I had a
I
hard time
love the
ranking
Nameless
this one.
King. This
On one
is
hand,
my
I didn't
dude
want
right
3
here.
consecutive Dark Souls 3 bosses, but I also had way more trouble with this boss than I ever thought
The
about having
Nameless
with Orphan
King
of
was
Kos. The Nameless King is also my
this is a
favorite fight in Dark
legendary
Souls
fucking
3
boss
and
fight
the
for me.
entire
This is a
Soulsborne
legendary
series,
boss
rivaled
fight.
only by Melania from Elden Ring. So number 4 felt justifiable, as this boss is not only epic, has great lore, and a really cool boss arena and
His
theme,
boss
but it's
arena,
also
yeah,
one of the
that's what I was
most
saying. Like,
brutal fights in
his
all of
boss arena
Soulsborne.
is
With his lightning
fucking
imbued
nice,
attacks,
bro.
high damage
The
output, and
Nameless
delayed
King,
attacks, the Nameless King
man,
is truly
this
king of
shit
the
is
battlefield.
nice. Look at
This guy
that.
rides in on a dragon named King of the Storm like a total badass, and then you'll have to beat the hardest boss of Phase 1, the camera. Once you've defeated the King of the Storm, the Nameless King drains the dragon's power into his spear, and the real boss fight begins. Even
Yep.
on my best attempts at this boss, I never felt an ounce of safety. My adrenaline was flowing, and my heart was pounding. So for giving me
Yep.
the same feelings I get from seeing a double cheeseburger, the Nameless King sits at number 4 on the list, and number 1 in my heart.
So he already got Dark Eater Madeir. Show Dark Eater Madeir. To me, Dark Eater Madeir is the number one hardest boss ever. He said the Nameless King. I wonder who's like top 2 on here. I wonder.
Number 3, Demon of Hatred. Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. Much like I talked about with Orphan of Kos, I love
And
when
you say
bosses cause you to
Sekiro.
think outside of the box and break all the conditioning you've had up to the point of facing them. With Sekiro, you're conditioned to stand and fight, deflect and block attacks, and look for advantages. Demon of Hatred shows up and is like, "Do you even deflect, bro?" and then proceeds to barely give you attacks to deflect. The key to this fight is almost constant movement, dodging, and
Dang.
jumping, something that every other fight in the game actively punishes you for. But that's not all that makes Demon of Hatred one of the most legendary challenges to overcome, as its massive amount of health and death blow counters make for a much longer fight, even for a game full of long fights. But I'll let you in on a little secret if you don't want to actually face this boss.
What?
You can actually cheese this fight without ever swinging your sword, but it requires a very precisely timed jump and grab onto a building in the arena. But this will cause the Demon of Hatred to run off the cliff next to it in pursuit of his piece of cheese, giving you a free victory. I've defeated this boss normally, but you'll need the item he drops to platinum the game, so I definitely use this to speed up the platinum process on subsequent playthroughs. While this boss is entirely optional, as are a few of the bosses on this list already, that doesn't change the fact that it's one
Another
of the
thing
most
about these
mechanically
Soulsborne
difficult boss
games is
fights in
like
the entire
the
Soulsborne
hardest
series,
boss is
which earns it number 3
always
on the list, which
optional.
lets you know the final 2 are a death march of epic proportions. Number 2, Melania, Blade of
Millennium's number
Megaloth,
2.
Elden Ring. So we're
So
at the
who's
top
number
2, and
1?
honestly, these could have been
This bitch.
switched. Depending on the day, Melania is easily the hardest boss in the entirety of Soulsborne. And just so we're clear, wood. Over the past few years, people have found several strategies that work in defeating her, including summoning the legendary Luffy solo her,
I've
but that changes
I've
nothing.
noticed for me, I've noticed that she is really, really weak to blood, to bleed. She's very, very vulnerable to bleed, and she has terrible poise. So yeah, me and my mimic, you know what I'm saying? I had to level up, quite a bit and it took me so long to figure that out. It took me so long to figure that out. But when I figured it out and I leveled up, me and my mimic, we went in there and did our thing, But yeah, this chick right here, yeah, she's my number two. Dark Eden Madeir, then Melania. So I wonder who's his number one.
About how difficult she is. What makes Melania so difficult is her aggressive AI, insane combos such as Waterfowl Dance, and the fact that she heals with
That
every
water
single
flow dance.
strike.
Oh my
And really,
god.
her only one weakness is that she is very easily staggered by heavy hits. One false move and one massive combo from her either ends in your death or her health bar being almost completely
Yeah,
refilled, or both. All of her attacks do insane amounts of damage, and she's no stranger to one-shotting you. When she rises into the air,
I'm
she's loading up her
saying, bro.
Waterfowl Dance, and your best course of action
That
is to
right
run
there
as far
killed me
away as
so
possible.
much.
And then when her third set of
That
attacks
killed me
begins,
so
dodge
much.
roll
Oh my
into
god.
her and get away from her on the other side before the fourth goes off. And then there's her second phase, and again,
Yeah.
definitely would. Unleashing the
Her
Goddess
second
of Ra
phase is,
phase,
oh my god.
Melania has a smaller health pool in this phase, but several moves now inflict the terrible Scarlet Rot status effect. You'll want to actively avoid these moves if you want any hope of defeating her.
Oh.
Not only does her Waterfowl Dance become even more potent, she also raises into the air and unleashes ghost-like clones of herself to attack you.
Look at that.
Defeating Melania is one of my proudest video
Look
game
at that.
accomplishments ever, and with good reason. She was the first Souls super boss I had ever defeated, but to be honest, I did so as a filthy casual and used Mimic Tier and
saying.
Rivers of Blood to do so. In subsequent playthroughs,
Sound
I've
like what I
defeated her
did.
with more traditional methods, but you know what they say, you never forget your first.
Ready for a great internet value? You got it from Quantum Fiber. It's internet freedom.
Before we
Let's
get to
see.
number one, let's look at some honorable mentions. Fume
Okay.
Knight, Dark Souls 2.
I didn't play Dark Souls 2, so I wouldn't
Ornstein and
notice.
Smo, Dark Souls.
Them two, they were cool. Them two were cool.
Guardian Ape, Sekiro, Shadows Die
Guardian Ape.
Twice.
Is he holding a head? What the fuck?
Ludwig, The Accursed, Bloodborne.
Yeah, see, I don't think I got that far in Bloodborne.
Number one, Ishin, the Sword Saint. Sekiro,
Ishin?
Shadows Die
Serious?
Twice. I think it was pretty obvious when Melania was number two that Ishin, the Sword Saint, was going to be number one, but in my
Okay.
opinion, deservedly so. With Melania, you can use a larval tier to respec, grind some smithing stones, and come back with new weapons and strategies to tackle her. But with Ishin, you've only got the shinobi tools you've gotten throughout Sekiro's journey and whatever prayer beads you've collected. Even with increased power, Sekiro balances the game in a way that you're only ever as strong as the game allows you to be at any certain point. You're
might have to
also
play
locked into one
Sekiro
playstyle for the entire
see
game,
why this
and
dude
while
is
you
so
should have
hard.
gotten good with that single playstyle over the course of the game, Ishin is an entirely different monster. While his first phase is actually Genichiro Ashina, he still has 3 more phases after that, with each phase getting
What?
more insane. The
3
only
more
real relief you
phases?
get with Ishin is if you make it to phase 4, and that's due to the lightning counter.
This dude has
making it
4
easier to
fucking
defeat his
phases?
final
What the
phase of the
fuck?
fight. But the trick is actually getting there. This is a true war of attrition with the most skilled and legendary swordsman in all of Ashina, and you'll have to conserve your healing and spirit emblems if you want to have a chance at making it through this war. Not only does Ishin
What the
wield his
fuck?
trusty blade, he also pulls out the Glocks and caps your ass, and then pulls out a spear
got
for
guns?
treasure. While you can bait certain attacks, one false swipe, one poor angle taken to get closer to him, and it's a run ender. Even in subsequent playthroughs, I've spent hours and hours trying to beat Ishin, and even victory feels hollow afterwards. I don't necessarily hate this fight, but I definitely dread it when I start getting close. For beating my ass for hours on end, Ishin the Sword Saint is the hardest boss in all of Soulsborne.
Ishi is the hardest boss in the Soul series. I'm gonna have to play Sekiro and face this Ichi person. What y'all think, man? Let me know in the comments down below what y'all think. Who's for all my gamers out there, all my Soulsborne gamers out there, let me know who was y'all hardest boss. What gave y'all the biggest problem? All my Sekiro players out there, let me know in the comments. You know what I'm saying? Like this is tripping me out. This Ichi person. As much as I've been around in the Elden Ring, I'm even in the Elden Ring like group chat, on Facebook with over like what 20,000 people in there, and nobody never brings up like Ichi. I see either Melania, of course, Malekith. I see now the Shadows of the Earth Tree bosses, Mesmir. I do hear about Dark Souls 3 bosses like the Lord of Cinder. I heard about him, but I've never seen no one even speak of this Ishi person. So I'm gonna have to get into that, man. But if y'all like the video, definitely leave me a like. Definitely always leave me a comment. And most importantly, y'all, hit that subscribe button, y'all. Hit that subscribe button, y'all. Please. Greatly appreciate it. To all my subs out there. To all my subs, as always, y'all know me. I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate it. There's no me without you. Seriously. Till next time, y'all. Savage Reactions. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'm out, y'all. Peace.